Assalamualaikum and welcome to this new episode of Full Metal Alchemy. So the first thing I want to talk about today is Idea Factory on August 17th. They held their usual Automate party where they reveal new details on some of their Josei Muke games, and they announce new games as well. So I'm not gonna go over all the information. They announced three brand new games in total, and they also reveal some new informations on some previously announced games. And there's one game in particular that really piqued my interest for a while now. It's called Over Requiem Z, and it's very interesting because first it's a co-joint development between Idea Factory and between Kogado Studio. And Kogado Studio is a Japanese company I've been talking about pretty often, and they're the makers of Aoi Umi no Tristia of the Deep Blue Sea. They're the makers of the Power Dolls series, etc. They used the Power Dolls, and recently they made a spiritual successor called 1-Inch Tactics. They do the Nurse Love Addiction series. They did recently another Yuri game called Yume Utsuru Remaster. Its sequel, Yume Utsuru Reafter. 1-Inch Tactic is a spiritual successor to Power Dolls. They did Symphonic Rain in the past as well. Symphonic Rain, which is celebrating its 20th anniversary. I talked about it a few episodes ago. And yeah, they do Aoi Umi no Tristia, which got a remaster lately. And the writer of the series, by the way, said that hopefully if the remaster sells well enough, they might do some remasters of the two other games after that. But sadly, nothing has gotten announced yet. So yeah, to be honest, like it's very expensive for a remaster. But yeah, it's also the first time the game got officially translated in English. The translation is pretty good from what I've seen. And yeah, but anyway, and Kokado Studios, I do tons of ADV games. Star Melody, Maybe Dreamer is something I started playing. I need to finish it as well. They do Josei Muke, Donsei Muke. They do some Yuri. They do all of different stuff. And they do Josei Muke and Otome games as well. And one Otome game they did in the past is called Palais de Rennes, which is a racing simulator with Otome and with some simulation and some strategy, etc. And that was first released in 2006, and they did a PC remaster that got released a few years ago on Steam. So Kogado has actually several teams that each work on several series, and obviously like the company has been existing for over a century, and they started making games around 40 years ago in the 70s, in the 90s, in the 80s or something. So obviously there's different teams making the different games, but obviously for like 40 years it's not the same people, right? So I assume probably the team working on Over Requiem Z is probably the same team who made some of the Otome games in the past and who made Palais de Rennes. And yeah, to talk about Over Requiem Z itself, it's a game that is set in some fantasy world called Oz. It's ruled by four witches and a king, and the protagonist is a girl who gets forcefully sentenced to death, and she gotta travel with some fellow sentenced to death people. They're all bishonens, and they're all actually murderers. She needs to travel with them to some dangerous places with monsters in order to find evidence of her innocence. And basically, it's described as a game where you need to make choices to choose between two routes, whether you go for the truth routes or whether you go for the, like, I don't know how you can translate it, like the Yamiochi, like the route where you go into darkness and you embrace like the murderous side and stuff. It's a Renai ADV, so it's just some Otome games elements, and I'm really excited for this, and it's pretty interesting because it also has some seiyuu I really like as well. For now it's announced only for Nintendo Switch, and you have 2025 release, and most notably there's many very popular seiyuu like Ishikawa Kaito, and there's also Azakami Yohei, and Azakami Yohei is the seiyuu of Kamimura Seijuro in Shin Sakura Taisen, and like I talked about the other day, I really like Shin Sakura Taisen, and Kamiyama Seijuro is a really cool character as well. And recently, Asakami Yohei got extremely popular because he was voicing Gruyere, I don't know how you pronounce his name, in G-Witch, the witch from Mercury Gundam. So it was a really, really popular role, and I didn't watch the series yet, but the series, like, he was a really popular character, and it really boosted his career. And he's also Dido, the protagonist of Super Robot Wars DD, so he's often on the Super Robot Wars streams as well. So yeah, that's one of the reasons, like there's several reasons why I'm really excited for this game. To be honest, I don't play that many ADV games because in the first place, like since 2018, I don't play many games in the first place, and then I don't play that much ADV and that much visual novels, but I really would like to play more of them because they're a huge part of otaku culture, so I would like to play more of them, some BL games as well. So yeah, this has really piqued my interest. And there's a trailer as well that got released 3 months ago, so I'm not gonna show you all the trailer because you can watch it yourself if you want. It's not new. It's like from 3 months ago, back when the game was first announced. So yeah, so this other Requiem Z game is pretty intriguing, and hopefully it's gonna release soon. Like obviously I'm not gonna be able to play it at release, but like I'm really excited for this. Really interested in this. So I don't know if you've seen this, but in early August, on August 8th, Yoastar has announced that they're going to start making their own mobile games. They're going to develop and make their own IP and make their own mobile game. And this is pretty interesting news I wanted to talk about, and I didn't until now because I didn't have the time. Because there's very multiple layers to this, because Yoastar is a complicated company to explain, because if I understood correctly, basically it's a Japanese company, but it was made by a Chinese person, by a Chinese person who was living in Japan because he was an otaku, and he made his own company, and they specialize in localizing Chinese and Korean mobile games in Japan. And Yoastar, they got popular most notably by localizing in Japan Azur Lane, and Azur Lane is initially a Chinese game. With the launch of Azur Lane, Yoastar got incredibly popular, and that's how they got much bigger. And they later on also, like a few years ago, they also started localizing and releasing in Japan Blue Archive, and Blue Archive is also one of the most popular mobile gacha games now, a story-focused mobile gacha game with a battle system with auto elements. It's an RPG with auto elements similar to Prikone, Princess Connect. It's the same battle system basically. And Blue Archive is actually a Korean game. It's by Nexon, the Korean company Nexon. And so yeah, so this is really interesting because I'm really curious to see what kind of game they will do, seeing their experience with Arknights, with Blue Archive, and with Azur Lane. And in particular, I'm really curious, like, to see what the character design will be like, and because character designs in Sosage is a very big subject. I'm actually writing something about it. Like, hopefully I will be able to publish a very big article focusing on character designs in gacha games in a few weeks. And my global idea is basically characters in gacha games, they're all based on very popular and very classic anime and game characters from previously existing characters. Because the thing is, in gacha games, you need players to recognize something. You need players to recognize a stereotype. You need players to recognize something that will immediately want them to pull the character. So that's always why they make very characters very similar to previously existing characters, previously already popular characters, so that way players already know the character in a way and they're more inclined to pull. And that's also why they do a lot of typecasting, a lot of seiyuu voicing the characters. They're voicing the characters because they're already in the past voiced a popular character that was very similar to the character in the gacha game. So with taking all this into account, I'm very curious to see what kind of game Yoastar is going to make. And this is one thing I wanted to talk about. And the other thing is Yoastar has also announced that the developers of Blue Archive, Nexon, they made a brand new game announcement. For now, it's just called Project KV, and there's a countdown which will be ending on September 1st. So I'm really curious to see what kind of game this will be as well. And this is from the developers of Blue Archive, so I'm expecting something very story heavy, similarly story heavy, and I'm very curious. I'm not playing Blue Archive because, like I always say, I say this half jokingly, but I call myself a Blue Archive hater because I have several reasons why I don't like the game, and I'm planning to write about this as well one day, inshallah. But anyway, so I'm really excited. Like I'm not really excited. I'm more like curious, like not morbidly curious, but like I just want to see what's going to happen because Blue Archive by now is like a big part of of otaku culture in Japan, even if I don't like it. So I'm like very curious to see what Joestar is cooking, like cool kids say these days. And yeah, Yogstar is like a worldwide company now, so they also publish games and localized games outside Japan. And most notably, they are going to handle the English localization of Heaven Burns Red, which is my favorite gacha game and my favorite visual novel of these last few years. So I'm really excited that the game is finally going to release in English, and I already talked about it back when it was first announced. So yeah, you should play this when it gets released in English. And if you're practicing Japanese, you should try and play the game in Japanese because it's fully voiced and there's no narration, so it's very easy to understand and to practice your audio understanding. So after a short countdown of a few days, Genki, Japanese company Genki, they announced a brand new Shutoko Battle, which was named Tokyo Extreme Racer in English. It's a series of street racing games with tuning, etc. So let's watch this short teaser first. So yeah, Shutoku Battle is a series of racing games, and it's very similar to a manga called Wangan Midnight, which was released like in the 90s. And this was a long running manga, racing manga. And like the first thing comparison that comes to mind is Initial D. Basically, Wangan Midnight is street racing in highways. Meanwhile, Initial D is street racing in mountain roads. So it's technically not the same thing. It's very different. And Shitoku Batoru is very similar to Wangan Midnight. And I used to play one of the first games in the series, which was on Dreamcast, like over 20 years ago. And it was in Japanese, so it was released in English as well, but I was playing the Japanese version, so I never finished it because I couldn't understand everything in terms of tuning, etc. But it was really interesting. So this is just fair, like you can tell, like the people at Genki right now, they're very like savvy about the current gaming industry because this brand new Tokyo Extreme Racer, this brand new Shitoku Battle game, they announced it only on PC via Steam for now. And this is very interesting because they know how the market works currently, and they know how there's many more and more PC players nowadays, be it in Japan or be it worldwide. And speaking of which, like a little tangent, but one thing people outside Japan, one misconception they have with Japanese gamers is they believe that Japanese gamers are only on consoles, and that's not true. And in the 80s, in the 90s, you had a lot of people playing on PC as well, and then in the early 2000s with the PS2, etc., most of the gamers switched like to fully console, and then in the late 2000s, in the early 2010s, with the start of the gacha industry, a lot of people switched to mobile instead. So and nowadays with some of the biggest, most popular games worldwide, like Fortnite, like Apex, AP とか Battle とか Valorant, like Minecraft, etc. You have a lot more PC gamers now in Japan as well. So it's very funny because you had some companies like Nihon Falcon, for example. They used to be only on PC, and then in early 2000s, in mid 2000s, they switched to PlayStation, right? So yeah, a lot of people don't realize that there's a like obviously there's a big PC gaming history in Japan as well. And with Fortnite and with Apex and with Dead by Daylight, etc. These are the most popular games that Japanese streamers and Japanese gamers are playing on PC. So that was like a huge comeback to PC gaming this last few years. So it's very interesting to see Tokyo Extreme Racer, the brand new game, gets announced only on PC because it shows that the people currently at Genki, they know what they're doing. So even if they didn't announce like who is the staff or like who's working on this game, it's like I can already tell that at least they know what they're doing because PC gaming market like is very important. And Genki for these last 20 years, they were most notably making arcade game versions of Wangan Midnight. So this manga, right? Since it's very popular in Japan, it also had many gaming adaptations. And Genki, the studio making Shutoku Batoru, they did a lot of Wangan Midnight games. So they specialized in racing games and in street racing games. So together with Bandai Namco, like since like at least for over 15 years now, since like late 2000s, they used to make some Wangan Midnight games on PlayStation and some Shutoku battle games as well. And then they started making more on arcades and on mobile. So yeah, like in all of the 2010s, they made arcade games and mobile games. So these people who made all the recent Wangan Midnight games, they are the ones who are making the new Shutoku battle. So it's very promising. And obviously, I don't live in Japan, so I never played these arcade games myself, but like from what I've seen, they're pretty good. So yeah, it's very promising. Be it the fact that they announced it on PC, or be it the fact like if you look at their recent record, it's very promising in my opinion. Even if you haven't seen any gameplay yet, so I'm really looking forward to this. And one day I would like to replay some of the older ones as well, because the very first one in the series was in Super Famicom or something, I think. So I'd like to play some of the older games and then try to replay the Dreamcast ones as well. And so yeah, so she's very exciting news. There's another thing I wanted to talk about as well, because on the subject of racing manga, so there's Wangan Midnight. So I never read this. I need to read it one day. And this Initial D, obviously. Initial D, I need to watch the ending on there. I never watched the ending, and I didn't start reading MF Ghosts, the sequel. Like it's taking place in the same world. It's with some returning characters. I never read that either. That's what it was called, right? Yeah, MF Ghosts. I need to read this one day. And one thing I want to talk about is there's one racing manga I really like. It's called Kanojo no Karera. It's by Asami Akiya, and Asami Akiya is one of my favorite artists and mangaka. He's the one who did Silent Mobius. Like, I don't know if you've ever heard about this. It's a series from the 90s. And I need to rewatch it because I barely remember anything from it. And there's also a game, I think on PS1 or on Sega Saturn. I want to play this one day as well. So he did Corrector Yui as well. Corrector Yui, I never watched it either. I gotta watch it. And he's also a very prolific character designer, and he's most notably one of the original character designers for Nadeshiko. So he's one of the original character designers for Hoshino Ruri, one of the most iconic characters, which is like less popular nowadays because most people don't know about Nadeshiko anymore. But like she's one of the most iconic and most influential anime characters of the 90s. So he's the original character designer. So Asami Akiya is doing this Kanojo no Karera racing manga. It's a really fun manga. I still haven't caught up because there's a first series in 24 volumes, and then there's a first sequel, Kanojo no Karera RS, and then there's another sequel, Kanojo no Kanojo no Karera GT3, and this one is still ongoing. And I didn't ever finish the first series, so I need to read it. So the story is basically a journalist. She's working as a journalist, and basically her father was rich. And each of their kids got some inheritance, and she got a Porsche from her father, and she slowly gets into street racing with a car. And each chapter she learns some new stuff, like on the car, on how to maintain it and how much it costs. And like it's very unrealistic, but at the same time very realistic, because she always talking about how expensive it is to maintain such a luxury racing car, etc. And it's a very interesting manga. And there's also, like, how to say this, like, over the course of the story, she also discovers that she's actually a lesbian. So there's also a lot of talk about this as well. So it's very, like, it's talking about a lot of things regarding Japanese society as well. She ends up meeting many women who are into street racing, and like they each have their own clubs, and they're like gangs, and they have their own tattoos and stuff. So like it's very interesting. So I gotta try and reread this one day and write about it on my blog as well. So yeah, I wanted to quickly talk about the Shutoku Battle new game, and I wanted to talk about Kanojo no Karera as well. So she's a really interesting manga. You should check it out if you can. Oh yeah, and another detail regarding Kanojo no Karera is that the protagonist of the series, she has her cousin, and her cousin is actually a pro driver, and she also has her own spin-off series, which was only 4 volumes, and she's pretty much my favorite character, and she's very interesting because she's still in high school, but she's over 18 years old, because she basically, like, I don't want to spoil too much, but the story talks about her and her racing, but it also talks about her school life and how basically she got bullied and she ended up repeating several years maybe. So that's why she's over 18 years old, but she's still in high school. And it's a very interesting story as well. And she regularly appears in the main manga, Kanojo no Karera. And she also got her own spin-off manga called Zero Angel. So she's a really cool character. So if you like her design, you should check it out. Just wanted to add this. Some very quick news to talk about how Mildom has announced that they're closing down. Mildom is a streaming platform just like Twitch and just like YouTube. It was kinda pretty popular in Japan because a lot of very popular people were streaming both on Twitch and both on Mildom. And for example, Daigo, fighting games player Daigo, and some other fighting games player, they streamed on Mildom at some point. And some seiyus I like as well. Ueda Kana, the seiyu of Tosaka Rin, or more recently and more popularly for younger anime fans, she is Yoimiya in Genshin, one of my favorite Genshin characters. Ueda Kana, she was streaming on Mildom as well at some point. I used to watch her a little bit there. So yeah, and the company behind Mildom has announced that the streaming site is going to close down on September 1st this year. Actually, the company behind is called Douyu. It's a Chinese company, and they're basically Douyu is basically a Chinese streaming site. So Mildom was basically the Japanese equivalent, and it was opened in 2019. So it lasted like 5 years, which is maybe even longer than Mixer, like Microsoft's Mixer. I'm not sure anymore, but like. Yeah, sadly it didn't work out, and I guess like most people kind of left the platform recently because like with the pandemic especially, like Twitch was already popular in Japan, but with the pandemic especially, like I think Twitch became like a huge, like most Japanese streamers started being on Twitch rather than YouTube and rather than Nico Nico. So yeah, sadly for Mildom, like it kinda didn't manage to keep going. So yeah, it's closing down, and I don't know, like this reminds me of Amazon closing Twitch in Korea, right? So obviously it's not the same issue and it's not the same problems that led to this, but yeah, it's kind of sad. Like I don't think it was necessarily Like, yeah, the problem with companies is they make decisions as always because it's not making enough money for them. But I don't think it was maybe like it was very popular because, like I said, some popular series, some popular streamers, etc. They were on Mildom, so yeah, but they are still closing it down anyway. So I guess for them it wasn't enough money. So just like Twitch, just like Amazon, who's always complaining that they're losing money with Twitch, even if they're making billions anyway with Amazon, etc. But yeah, it's just companies just closing down stuff as always. But yeah, anyway. Another very quick news is that Another Eden, the gacha RPG game, has announced they're making a collab with KOF 15, the King of Fighters 15. So they're adding Terry Bogard, Kusanagi Kyo, Kura Diamond, and Shiranu Imai to the game. And Another Eden is, I never played it myself, but apparently it's very different from other gacha games in how these kind of collab events, they are not time limited. So even if you don't start playing the game right now, you will still be able to get the crossover characters like at any point, from what I understand. And I didn't have the time to try the game myself, but yeah, Another Eden, it's in English, it's on Steam and mobile. So the King of Fighters collab has just started, and Another Eden, one interesting thing about it is that it's one of the games by Right Flyer Studios. Right Flyer Studios is the developer of Heaven Burns Red, which I'm regularly talking about. And Another Eden, the main writer of Another Eden is Kato Masato, who was the main writer of Chrono Trigger and Chrono Cross, and also Baron Kaitos, which recently got a remaster. So if you like these games, if you like the atmosphere, if you like the setting, if you like the kinda oniric, kinda mysterious atmosphere that Chrono Trigger, Chrono Cross, and Baron Kaitos can have at times, you might like Another Eden, so you should check it out. So yeah, that's why Another Eden did a Chrono Cross collab like 1 year ago before the remaster, because it's the same writer actually. And a lot of people don't know this, but yeah, Kato Masato was the main writer of Chrono Trigger, Chrono Cross, Baron Kaitos, and he also worked on a few other games I don't remember what. So you should check out his Wikipedia page if you wanna get some more details. So yeah, I'm gonna try and play this game one day if I have the time. But yeah, one good thing about this is that there's no time limit, so you can get the characters at any time. Like even if you play now, you can still get the Chrono Cross event. You can still lose the Chrono Cross event. There's no time limited events basically in this game. So it is a very different thing from most gacha games, which wanna make you gather new players as soon as possible, as fast as possible, so they always do time-limited events. But this game has no time-limited events from what I understand, so you will be able to do this KOF event at any time, whenever you decide to play the game. So now to talk a little bit about some manga, Yabuki Kentaro, Yabuki Sensei, has published a brand new Trouble illustration on August 19th. It's Kotegawa Yui with a baby version of Furito, and I just wanted to talk about it because it's the first time he's posting an illustration in quite a long time now. And Yabuki Kentaro is a mangaka of Black Cat, which is one of my favorites post-2000s Shonen Jump manga, and I really like Black Cat, and it's the main reason why I read Turaburu, because I really like Black Cat, and some Black Cat characters reappear in that manga. And Yabuki Kentaro recently he did Ayakashi Triangle, and the series has just ended, and I didn't read it, so I don't know yet how good it is and if it was interesting or not. So that was his latest series, and it just ended like a few months ago, and he still haven't announced a new manga, so I'm wondering what he's working on nowadays. And interestingly, back in 2023, the Black Cat anime has got a new Twitter account, and it's pretty funny because the anime aired like in early 2000s, in 2004 4 or something, and they made for some reason they made a Twitter account, but they didn't announce anything. They just made a Black Cat Twitter account. So my theory is that Yabuki Kantaro is finally going to do a Black Cat sequel, because if you've read the Black Cat manga, at the end in the auto comments, Yabuki Sensei was saying that basically the end of the manga was like end of a part 1, and if he can, he would like to do a part 2 one day. So my theory is like Yabuki Kentaro Sensei could be working on a Black Cat part 2 right now. Maybe it's going to be his next manga, and maybe that's also why the anime got a Twitter account out of the blue, like for no reason in 2023, because like they didn't announce anything. They just made some tweets about the series and I think they announced some merch maybe, but they didn't announce anything. Like there's no new anime adaptation or anything. And yeah, Black Cat is one of my favorite post 2000s Shonen Jump manga. In my opinion, it's just as good as, like it's almost just as good as some of the classics from the 80s. So like I really like this series, and it's one of the first manga I read like while it was ongoing in a way. So yeah, I'm really excited. Hopefully they will make something new about this, as hopefully we will actually get a sequel or something. And Yabuki Kentaro was also the illustrator of another series. He's the illustrator of 2W. 2W is actually written by another person, and he's a co-author basically. Hasemi Saki was an assistant of Yabuki Kentaro. So Yabuki Kentaro is basically the co-author, but he's not the main author of 2W. He's just the illustrator, but just under brackets. Another series he was the illustrator for is Mayoi Neko Overrun. And Mayoi Neko Overrun was originally a light novel. Sadly, the light novel author Matsu Tomohiro passed away like over 10 years ago or something. Yeah, in 2016, sadly. So Mayoi Neko Overrun was really interesting because it was a comedy series, but it was also very serious and talking about orphans in Japan and Japanese society and how they deal with orphans, or more like how they don't deal with orphans. So despite being a comedy series, it was very deep and very interesting, and sadly, it was never finished. And in a way, it was very similar to Papa no Yukoto Kikinasai, Papa Kiki, which is another series by the same author, and it's also the same themes. It's also dealing with a bunch of girls who suddenly lose their parents, and I think it's one of their uncles. He needs to take care of them. He needs to raise them, basically. And that's what the story is about. And I gotta try to read this at some point. So yeah, this author, his two most famous series, Mayoi Neko Overrun and Papa no Yukoto Kikinasai, they both deal with orphanage and orphans in a way that you don't really see that much in mainstream Japanese media. So if you can, you should check them out one day. And the anime adaptation of Mayoi Neko Overrun was extremely funny, especially it had some really good episodes. So if you can, you should check out the anime version too, because it was really funny in my opinion. So yeah, hopefully maybe there's actually going to be some kind of Black Cat sequel getting announced soon. We'll see what happens. For now, Yabuki Kentaro Sensei hasn't announced anything ever since Ayakashi Triangle has finished, so I'm really curious what he's doing nowadays and if he's working on something new. So yeah. And so the last thing I want to talk about in this episode today is another manga related thing. Katsura Masakazu, one of my favorite mangaka and a very influential mangaka, has just opened his own Twitter account. And it's very funny because I used to think that he was already on Twitter because I was already following this account, but this account was actually just for his art exposition for his 40th anniversary. So he just opened his own personal Twitter account, and yeah, he's author, the mangaka of Wingman, of DNA 2, of Eyes, of Zetman, Video Girl Eye, etc. It's all very popular 80s and 90s popular shonen series. And I'm actually only familiar with Wingman because it's very popular in France. It's one of the first anime that aired in France in the 80s. And obviously, I didn't watch it back then. I watched some of the re-airings in the 90s when I was a kid. And Wingman, I wanna rewatch the series one day, and I wanna read the manga as well because I never read the manga. And it's one of these classic manga I wanna read and write volume by volume impressions on my blog. So hopefully I will be able to start this soon, inshallah. And yeah, so he did Wingman, he did Aizu. I never read this series as well. I really wanna read it. He did the Anatsu. The Anatsu, I think I saw the anime, I think. And the OVA, he did Zetman, so he did all of the series, and he also did the character design for some series as well. And most notably, he did the character design for Tiger and Bunny, which is one of my favorite anime of the 2010s. I really like this series, so if you've never checked it out, you should watch it. It's one of in my opinion, it's one of the best series of the last decade, just after Preterism, together with Moritsu Pirates, together with some few other series as well. So together with Sengoku Collection as well. So Tiger and Bunny is a really, really incredible series. And Katsura Masakazu did the original character design. And he was also the original character design for... He was also the original character designer for Astral Chain, which is on Nintendo Switch. It's one of the latest games by Platinum Games before they kinda went the wrong way with Babylon's Fall and with their weird changes. So I actually never played this yet, but yeah, I wanna play it just because of the character design, because Katsura Masakazu is one of my favorite artists of all time. So yeah, I gotta try and play Astral Chain at some point. So yeah, and Katsura Masakazu, maybe, I think like this is maybe just me making suppositions, but I assume like because he was really friends with Toriyama Sensei, and I guess like Toriyama Sensei passing away must have really affected him as well. So I think this could be one of the reasons why he decided to make his own Twitter account so he can connect more with fans. I definitely need to send him a message and to say how I really like his works and how it was really influential to me on my childhood, especially Wingman. Unlike Wingman, Aoi in Wingman is like one of the reasons why I'm so fond of blue-haired characters. She's like one of the first blue-haired characters I was in love with, like just like Creamy Mami, etc. So yeah, Wingman was a huge influence on me. So I really gotta read the manga and write about it. And another thing, so I talk about Tiger and Bunny, right? So one of the reasons why I like Tiger and Bunny is also because it's kinda a spiritual successor to Karas. And Karasu was an OVA from 20 years ago. It was the Tatsunoko Studio 40 anniversary project, if I remember correctly. And Karas basically shares a lot of core stuff with Tiger and Bunny. It's the same composer, if I remember correctly. It's the same, it's very the same vibe. And Tiger and Bunny is like a spiritual successor to Karas. And Karas was a 6-episode OVA. It was really, really funny, really, really, not funny, but really fun, really entertaining. It's a really spectacular OVA. Like even 20 years later, if you watch it now, it's still really mind blowing. So it really shows like it's the crown of the jewel of Tatsunoko production. It really shows like all the stuff they could do like at the apex of their anime art. If you're a Sakubuta and if you like animation, etc., you should definitely watch Karas if you never did. It's a really, really great OVA. So yeah, and then you should watch Tiger and Bunny as well. But yeah, Katsura Masakazu has opened his Twitter account, so I'm really hyped about this. I gotta try and send him some tweets, and yeah, and every day for now he's making some quick drawings of some of his characters. So she's the protagonist of Wingman. She's the girl from Wingman, if I remember correctly. There's several girls in Wingman. So yeah, I really like his works. This Aoi from Wingman, really, really one of my favorite characters ever. Like one of my first hypothetical future wives. So yeah, I just wanted to talk about this to finish this episode. So yeah, thanks for watching. Remember to check my blog in the description below. Please like and subscribe, and thanks for watching. Bye bye.